it also, I think, engages our minds, potentially.
Let's talk about your second guest. She's on the line, Yvette Hardie from ASSITEJ. We'll talk about what ASSITEJ actually is. Why have you chosen Yvette as your guest?
So Yvette and I had a meeting very recently, and I really love the sort of breadth of work that Yvette's engaged in, particularly through ASSITEJ, but also as an activist in some ways in the art space. And I think the youth audience and making work an artistic product for youth is just such an important part. I mean, if we don't do that, we don't have a generation who has a touchstone for the future. And so in that instance, I think this is really important work, and I think the work that Yvette is doing through ASSITEJ is really worth talking about.
Yvette, you are on the line, and I know that you've been listening to the conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Greg.
It's a pleasure, Yvette.
Yvette, just for our listeners, perhaps you could just explain what is ASSITEJ and the work that you do. Greg's touched on it, but perhaps you could just take that further.
Yeah, sure. So ASSITEJ is really about ensuring that every child in our country has access to the performing arts, wherever they happen to be. And I mean, that's quite a tall order because we know our context. We know how difficult it is for children to access anything, for many children in this country, having a toy of their own or a book of their own or even a meal, is sometimes a stretch. But we really believe that it is incredibly important that children have the opportunity to engage with the arts, precisely because of what Greg's just been talking about. In the arts, we're able to start to understand and to make meaning for ourselves. We have agency in constructing that meaning. And I think that that's something which we desperately need to give children, particularly when they are disempowered by their circumstances. They need to have the tools to be able to see differently, think differently, empathize with people different from themselves in order to be able to have agency in the world and to be able to make a change in their lives. So that's really our mission, and we do it in a whole lot of different ways. But I think one of the key things about ASSITEJ is that we're also a community. We're a community of artists and organizations that come together to make this a reality.
I'll raise it with both of you. I'm always interested in how we get kids into the theatre. I mean, Greg, it was interesting you talking about your mother. I mean, I can remember as well, as a very young child, being taken to various different musical theatre productions and that kind of thing. Not everyone has access to a theatre per se, and it talks to, yesterday we were talking about not everybody has access to a medical theatre, that they can't go and get operations. It's like about the geography of things. How can you deal with it? I mean, Greg, you are now the artistic director of a physical space, but it could then become, as we mentioned earlier, a metaphor for other opportunities. I'll start with you, Greg, and then Yvette, after that, perhaps we could just talk about how you are able to provide access, because access offers agency as well.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few strategies and a few things that are currently happening at the Market Theatre Foundation. So the Wendy Brow is one example of a program. The Market Theatre now has, or the Market Foundation is now, the Wendy Brow sits under that umbrella. And the Wendy Brow has a really wonderful youth program that happens in afternoons, and it allows children and teenagers who live on the doorstep of that building in Hillbrow to come in an afternoon to a safe space, a strange place in the sense that it's an old Edwardian building, but they find in that space hope, a sense of safety and a sense of being able to play and to really explore drama and find a community there. So that's really crucial. And the other things that can be done is obviously we can take work to places. So we're looking more and more at how we get work out to schools. And again, the Wendy Brow and Kwasha, which is connected to the Market Theatre Lab and the Wendy Brow, is this youth professional group, or this rather a young professional group that is making work for youth.
Yeah, they do amazing stuff.
They will take work to schools, so as opposed to and find a youth there. So instead of expecting youth to come to the building, we can take work to them. So those are sort of two things that are on the go, and that hopefully break down the barrier of well, how do we get them to come to the building?
Yvette, you mentioned the word community, Greg's also mentioned the word community. How do you see that as happening for young people? You don't have a specific theatre yourself, so I suppose for you, the idea of going out and really, really reaching into different spaces is critical.
Absolutely, and I mean that's where we're so lucky in terms of our structure, in that we do have this network of artists and organizations across the country who have access to different spaces. So whether they're working in creches or in schools or in community centres, or whether they have relationships with the local theatres, the municipal theatres, or even the bigger theatres, we're able to utilise those relationships and then find ways to get the arts to children on the ground. One of the things which has been absolutely phenomenal just in the last 6 months has been a program that we've been able to implement through the Social Employment Fund, which is administered by the IDC, where ASSITEJ is employing 1,650 artists around the country across 9 provinces. We are within 136 different organizations, and these artists are working part-time with children and young people in the arts every week. So we are reaching 50,000 children in rural settings, in township settings, in a variety of settings. And it's really exciting. It's been a complete game changer. It's really given flesh to what was there already. But just through this support, we've been able to ensure that the number of children accessing the arts has increased phenomenally just in the last 6 months.
Yvette, I'm trying. Was it the Magnet Theatre that started doing, and I think you were involved with it, work with babies?
Yes.
How does that even work?
So ASSITEJ is an international organization and is committed to making theatre and performing arts accessible to children literally from birth. But theatre for very young children has not been the norm in South Africa. So we're used to seeing theatre for children from say 6 up. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get a piece that might be suitable for maybe the 4 to 6 year old. But really, up until about 10 years ago, I would say, in South Africa, there was practically no work at all which was being made for the under 4s, and certainly none for newborn babies. So we, as ASSITEJ, and with links into the international community, started a process where, firstly, we, Magnet Theatre, Jenny Resnick, had an opportunity to attend some international events at ASSITEJ and to see some of this baby work. And we had a conversation where she said, she's really interested in trying to explore that with Magnet. And so we looked for international artists who were interested to come and work in South Africa and to do workshops with the Magnet Theatre trainees. And over a series of years, we brought different guests at different times to work with Magnet. And each resulted in a new kind of offering and a new level of work. And one of the very significant exchanges was with an Irish company called Replay, which does work for babies. And Jenny then worked with one of the very successful Magnet Theatre alumni, which is Kaleka Patuma. Everyone will know her, of course, as a published and highly acclaimed poet. But she's also a theatre director. And she, with Magnet, made the first baby piece called Scoop, a kitchen play for babies, which was with 4 actors and aimed at 8 children and their caregivers or parents in a very small, very intimate setting of a little tent where they are able to kind of magically invest ordinary things, the things that you might find in the kitchen, with a playfulness and an artistic quality that keeps the children absolutely captivated. And in fact, it's interesting that you mentioned this because I've just been reading a research study that was done on that particular piece. And one of the findings was how it impacted on fathers' relationships with their babies. Wow. And how fathers started to see their babies in an entirely new way, from understanding that their babies were able to engage with art in this way, that they had focus and concentration, that they found particular things funny, which their fathers had never expected them to engage with. And it really built that bonding relationship between fathers and their babies. in a very, very special way. So, yes, I mean, this kind of work, I think, is vitally important for us. But obviously it needs support because it's the kind of thing that, it's very intimate.
Well,
so it needs to have support.
Greg was saying he wants to bring young people back into the theatre.
Come with your baby.
It does raise this very interesting idea of like what a theatre then becomes. I mean, as you both mentioned the word community, but it also, it does then raise the question of community and commercial. I need to go to a break and then Greg will come straight back to you.
The Jet Set Breakfast on SAFM. Destination unknown.
We're talking to Greg Homann, the Artistic Director of the Market Theatre Foundation. His guest is Yvette Hardie from ASSITEJ. And really, one of the things that the conversation has raised is this idea of taking your kids to the theatre, knowing what it's like to have family members going to the theatre, and much more. And one of you has just commented on that.
Hello, Michelle. I am so enjoying your interview. And it brings back memories of my going to the Market Theatre with my two young teenage boys to listen to Hot Stick Mabooza, where I encouraged them to jive in the aisles, which was unheard of in those days. Viva! It's Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Well, Sipho Hot Sticks Mabooza, I'm sure you may remember or not, those two teenagers jiving in the passageways. Greg, it does talk to what we were talking about off air, though. Let's.
Yeah, and I think this is, it's wonderful to have Yvette with us and to talk about how we can think of theatre and art as being something not for a particular age, but for every age. And I think if, the market and the Market Foundation and all its activities really has the opportunity and is already in some ways doing this. It's touching people at every point in their life. And it can do that. And whether you're an artist or whether you're an audience member or whether you're someone who is just a tourist visiting the city or whatever, there's an opportunity for art to really touch you at every part of your life. And I think that's what the Market Theatre Foundation and the Market Foundation really needs to embrace. What is embracing already, and I'd like to strengthen that, is the opportunity for us to impact people's lives, whether they are a baby who's coming under the age of 4, or toddler, or whether it's someone in their teenage years, or whether it's a seasoned professional who has a project in mind and needs space to make it happen, or and so on. So through the work of the Wendy Brow, the Market Lab, which is if people don't know, is a 2-year training program for professional actors.
And I'll say I've seen some phenomenal productions. I think the Rhinoceros.
The
UNESCO does through them,
as well as having weekend classes on a Saturday for people who want to come and learn acting, even if they don't want that ever to become their career, and so on. So there are various programs there, and then the photo workshop, which skills and enriches photographers, and has an incredible program that touches every province in the country, and then creates exhibitions around some of that work and so on. So that. And I've often talked about, like, it doesn't just mean going to the theatre. It means knowing that you are you're a grandmother in Cape Town and you've got a child who's studying at the Market Lab, or you're part of a book club in Bryanston and you've got an interest in coming to watch something because a book you've read is now a stage play. Or you're a taxi driver and there's a kind of conversation happening in the car and you're in the taxi and you're kind of part of that. Theatre and art thrive when it's in the daily lives of us, and it's of most value when it's in our daily lives.
So I'll put this to both of you. When we think of theatres around the world, East, West, often the ones that are most successful are the ones that become the glue in the community. They almost become quite sticky in terms of the people that are attracted there, that go there, that spend time there. And it's not just, as you say, spending time to go and watch a performance, but just to be there, to work together. Yvette, where have you seen that, and how do you see that maybe from the outside as being something that could really be expended and expanded at the Market Theatre? I think you should get Wi-Fi in there for one.
There's Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm thinking about some of the theatres that I've seen in Germany, for example, that have become hubs for community dialogue and debate, and where there are community dinners that are held and conversations are had around the topics that are, sort of most pressing to that particular community. And it's really that sense of making people feel welcome and making people feel like this is a space for them. I think that one of the mistakes that so many theatres make is, and perhaps it's sort of linked to that thing of, wanting to make theatre an occasion. And of course it should be an occasion. And yes, it's lovely to dress up and go to the theatre and have that sort of pomp around it. But that can also be incredibly intimidating.
Sorry.
That can also be incredibly intimidating for people. And so I think that there needs to be a balance. I think there needs to be a sense that, that the theatre is a space of dialogue. It's a space of connection. It's a space of deep listening. It's a space of being together. Yeah. And that is really what needs to be inculcated and created in the space. One of the things I absolutely loved about Cradle of Creativity in 2017, which was this huge performing arts festival that we did for children and young people as part of the World Congress of ASSITEJ. And we were using the Artscape and the Baxter Theatre and the City Hall as our main spaces. And one of the things I absolutely loved about that was, particularly in the Baxter, where we had a focus on the work for the early years, we had everywhere there were spaces where children and parents and caregivers could engage with. There were things that they could look at and crawl through and see and witness, and the whole theatre was just, alive with these little bodies and people. And there was a real sense of it being an accessible space for all. And equally, one of the things which was so lovely was going into some of the cultural hubs, so places like our own space in Vrygrond Community Centre, and bringing artists and audiences from outside that community into that community and making everybody feel at home there.
Yeah.
It's a really special thing to do.
Let's close off, Greg, with you, because we have a few minutes and then we're out. So when you talk about the space that the Market Theatre will become under your guidance.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Yvette has said it really well, and we've been talking about it this morning, is it's about shared ownership. And I mentioned that phrase earlier. But I think it's about everyone feeling like they have a piece of the space. It's a home away from home for artists, for audience members, for people who are studying and training to be photographers and actors. And that it's an incredible resource. I mean, there's this amazing resource there. There's incredible history.
Yeah.
And if we can activate it as a shared space and a space of shared ownership where people hang out, they talk, they have conversation, it leads to other projects, and maybe it leads to projects and other things that happen well beyond that space. That's absolutely fine. But it just needs to be a hub where you can go, you can have a drink, you can have a conversation, you can engage with fellow artists, and if you've got an idea, you can test the idea. So in the next few weeks, hopefully very, very soon, we'll announce a development program for artists, which hopefully will give artists across different levels of experience an opportunity to come to the market and make their work and to create their work and to develop their work. And then hopefully we can announce a program in the coming weeks as we firm it up that is really stimulating and exciting and energizes just how we think about where we live and how we feel.
This month is Black History Month. Have you got any productions that you're going to be focusing on? Yeah,
we have one event. It is unfortunately not an open to the public event. It's an event for the American Embassy with their invited delegates and dignitaries. And we're making a short work that looks at the relationship between Steve Biko's politics and his life alongside Malcolm X's politics and life, and it becomes almost a kind of conversation point between those two, major figures of Black history.
Geez, I look forward to seeing which actors are going to take that part. Hey, that's like something you'd love to do. Greg, I wish you all the best. Yvette, thank you so much for joining us. Yvette Hardie of ASSITEJ, and also Greg Homann, the Artistic Director of the Market Theatre Foundation. We forget the importance of the sticky space that is a theatre. Let's go back to